I'm not going to sugarcoat it for everybody. Joe Manchin effectively ended Joe Biden's presidency, and he was laughing as he did it and pissing on its ashes. So let's take a look at an appearance he made on Fox News where he explained, I'm pretty much a no under every circumstance now on Build Back Better.
I've tried everything humanly possible. I can't get there.
Now, Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Good to be with you, Brett.
Senator, you're at the center of this negotiation with the president over his social spending and tax bill, the Build Back Better bill that is not coming up in the Senate before the new year, in part largely because of your reservations. Without you, the leadership doesn't have the votes it needs. So today, right now, what's the state of play?
Well, Brett, this is a mammoth piece of legislation, and I had my reservations from the beginning when I heard about it 5.5 months ago, and I've been working diligently every day and every minute of every day. I've been working on this, meeting with, whether it be the President Biden, whether it be Majority Leader Schumer and his staff, whether it would be with Nancy Pelosi, all of my colleagues, from all different spectrums of the political spectrum, if you will, from the right to the left. I've done everything humanly possible. And my concerns I had, and I still have these concerns, and where I'm at right now, the inflation that I was concerned about, it's not transitory, it's real, it's harming every West Virginian. It's making it almost difficult for them to continue to go to their jobs, the cost of gasoline, the cost of groceries, the cost of utility bills, all of these things are hitting in every aspect of their life. And you start looking at, then you have the debt that we're carrying at $29 trillion. You have also the geopolitical unrest that we have. You have the COVID variant, and that is wreaking havoc again. People are concerned. I've been with my family. I know everyone's concerned. So when you have these things coming at you the way they are right now, I've always said this, Brett, if I can't go home and explain it to the people of West Virginia, I can't vote for it. And I cannot vote to continue with this piece of legislation. I just can't. I've tried everything humanly possible. I can't get there.
There it is. Now, I warned you this would happen. There were only 6 progressives in the House who voted no on the traditional infrastructure bill, knowing that when you delink traditional infrastructure from reconciliation isn't going anywhere. They warned you this would happen. And here it is. Right in front of our eyes. Exactly what the left said would come to pass is coming to pass. So for Pramila Jayapal, Ro Khanna, all the lefties, nominal lefties who fell in line, how do you feel? How do you look? Are you embarrassed? You should be embarrassed. We warned you this would happen. I did a segment at the time, and I said, either they'll just turn around and say, oh, I know I gave you my word, I'm going to vote for Build Back Better, and that we'd get the details worked out, but I'm going back on it. I'm not going to do it. Sorry. Either that was going to happen, or the other possibility was take the bill that was already watered down, I believe, 4 times, water it down even more, pass that, and then turn around to the progressives in the House and say, it's this or nothing. So, the left wanted $10 trillion. Then Bernie said, okay, let's do 7. Then we got a negotiation down to 3.5. Then it got down to a little over 2. Now we're talking about 1.75 or 1.8. So I guess it was 5 times that it was weakened. And then ultimately they could have passed a $900 billion bill or 1.2 trillion or something and turned around to progressives and said, this is the best we're going to get, so fall in line. But we didn't even get that. We got, I'm not for any version of this bill is what Joe Manchin is saying. Stop and think about that. This bill was changed a bunch of times to accommodate Joe Manchin to get his vote. And even after they gave him everything, he turns around and says, well, I'm not in favor of that. So you lied. When you said, we'll work out the details, don't worry, you have my word. You lied about that. You're a liar. That's what you are. Now, his objections are the even more infuriating part because every one of his objections are not a real objection. So let's go through it. Inflation. He says, look, I'm worried about inflation. Okay, well, guess what? The Build Back Better bill has virtually no impact on inflation. That's not me speaking. That's top economists speaking. Now, what's the actual cause of inflation? You've heard me say this a million times, but it's the supply chain. The supply chain is giving us inflation because you have increased demand. More people are ordering stuff from home, and you have a lot of the ports are clogged because during COVID, there was a bunch of PPE that was shipped everywhere. And then now, since there's an increased demand and not enough goods because there were lockdowns in various places around the world, you have low supply, increased demand, clogged ports, boom, there you have inflation. Now, beyond that, it's also corporate greed that's leading to inflation. That's not my opinion. That's a fact. It's been reported on by Business Insider, among many other places. You have outlets like Walmart, for example, are raising their prices, not necessarily because certain goods are impacted by inflation, but they see inflation as a good scapegoat to just raise prices and increase profits, and that's reflected in the corporate profits that we see right now. So corporate profits are at a record high right now, because they're using the excuse of inflation to jack up virtually all prices, even for goods that aren't impacted by inflation. So you have corporate greed. You also have monopolies too, by the way, are leading to inflation. When you have only 3 or 4 meat packing companies and they could just jack the prices, there's no competition. Competition would drive down the price. Well, so it's monopolies, it's corporate greed, and it's the supply chain leading to inflation. It has nothing to do with the COVID rescue bills, the big spending bills. It has nothing to do with them. That's a fact. This isn't Kyle talking, because my instinct was actually to think maybe Manchin is right. Maybe it is the big spending bills that are leading to inflation. Every time I talk to economists and experts, they make perfectly clear it has nothing to do with that. So you could be forgiven if you're watching the show and you thought, well, hey, maybe that's what's leading to inflation. But when the experts describe in very clear detail how that's not the case, you go, oh, okay, I guess I was wrong. Joe Manchin, now I don't know if he knows it or doesn't know it, but he might know that the big spending isn't leading to inflation, and he's just using this as a scapegoat. That's very likely what he's doing. How do I know that? Well, he brings up gasoline and utility bills as well. What the hell does the price of gasoline have to do with Build Back Better? What the hell does the price of utility bills have to do with Build Back Better? If anything, Build Back Better would help people with their utility bills. Why? Because you're taking certain bills off the table for people. With the original Build Back Better bill, child care, elder care, lowering the Medicare age, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, these are things that help working people. It's not going to hurt them in terms of being able to afford their utility bill. It's going to make it so they can afford their utility bill. Much more likely to afford it if you have Build Back Better pass. Then we really drop off a cliff because he brings up the debt. He says, look, we got $29 trillion in debt, so that concerns me. Well, hold on now. First of all, any real economist will tell you the way you run a sovereign nation with its own currency is not the same as a household. So yeah, you need to make sure you balance your checkbook. The government doesn't have to do that. We are the world reserve currency. We have our own sovereign currency. And what we learned from Keynesian economics and MMT and other schools of economic thought is that especially when there's an economic downturn or there's a problem like a pandemic or something, the government is the spender of last resort, and that gives a spark to the economy. So you're supposed to deficit spend in many situations. This is one of those situations, which is why you saw not only Biden deficit spend, but Trump was deficit spending too. And to bring up, so he doesn't know, I'm not sure he knows the difference between the national debt and the deficit, which is different. Deficit is the yearly amount that you're in the red. National debt is the total accumulation of debt since the founding of the nation. Virtually every nation on earth has a giant national debt. Japan, they've been predicting a debt crisis in Japan for decades. It never came. Why? They have their own sovereign currency, and so when they deficit spend, it's not the problem that people pretend it's going to be. So I don't know if he knows the difference between the national debt and the deficit, but either way, to be concerned about it, Joe Manchin just voted for the military bill. The military bill, over a 10-year period, which is the same period for Build Back Better that we talk about when we give the price tag on that, is over $7 trillion. It's between $7 and $8 trillion. So he voted for a $7 to $8 trillion bill, but he won't vote for one that's shy of $2 trillion? No, see, it's an excuse. The other thing is, he's worried about the deficit and the debt. He just voted for the traditional infrastructure bill, which adds over $200 billion to the deficit. So he's lying to you. This isn't a real concern. He's giving himself an out. He's using a Weasley argument to give himself an out for a piece of legislation he never wanted to vote for anyway. Now, why doesn't he want to vote for it? Well, The Intercept had a great article called Joe Manchin's Dirty Empire, where they lay out in no uncertain terms this guy makes a bunch of money, likely millions of dollars, from dirty energy. There's climate provisions in this legislation originally, which may have hurt the fossil fuel industry. He doesn't want to tank the fossil fuel industry because that tanks his bottom line. So he's corrupt. He's corrupt. He has conflicts of interest. Did you know that over the past decade, over 50 billionaires have donated to Joe Manchin? He's representing them. He's not representing his constituents. And he says, oh, if I can't explain it, I can't vote for it. If you can't explain it, you can't vote for it. Okay, well, I got news for you. The vote you're not going to be able to explain is the vote that you say you're going to take now, that you're going to vote against it. Because I have the numbers in front of me, There was a poll done by Data for Progress not too long ago on Build Back Better in West Virginia. They went specifically to West Virginia. Get this. West Virginia voters who support Build Back Better, 68%. Democratic West Virginia voters who support it, 90%. Independents who support it, 64%. Get this, I love this one. Republican voters in West Virginia who support Build Back Better, 56%. The vote that you can't explain, Joe Manchin, is the one that you just said you'd cast. A no on Build Back Better. And by the way, I'm giving you the broad breakdown of Build Back Better. They polled and asked about Build Back Better. That was the reaction. When you actually go provision by provision, it's even more popular than this leads on. So, look, call it what it is. The guy's corrupt. He was given free rein to destroy the bill in 1,000 different ways. He does that, and then he still turns around and says, I'm not for it. So, Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, in the words of Tombstone, are you going to do something about it, or are you just going to stand there and bleed? And the answer is they're going to stand there and bleed. Now, listen, I don't think Democratic leadership really wanted the $3.5 trillion bill because they didn't fight for the $3.5 trillion bill. What I think they really wanted was basically a very slimmed down version of Build Back Better, probably around $1 trillion or so. So in other words, their politics, they thought aligned with Joe Manchin that we'll have a very slimmed down Build Back Better bill. But now Joe Manchin's like, no, I'm not even in favor of that. I'm not even in favor of a massively slimmed down bill. And so now you have some real friction, some real disagreement between Democratic leadership and Joe Manchin. Well, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? The answer is not going to do anything. Because they don't have the stones. They're not FDR. They're not LBJ. They don't know how to arm twist. So things you could do, I ran through this a million times. Joe Manchin's daughter is a criminal. She was involved in the EpiPen price gouging scandal. Investigator, prosecutor, convict her. You can. The dirt's there. We have her dead to rights caught on email talking about this stuff. Joe Manchin, I have no doubt he actually committed crimes. Real conflicts of interest, real corruption, personally profiting when he sits on a committee where he can determine the future of the United States in regards to the climate. Go after him. Prosecute him. Now, if you think, well, that's not a good idea, that won't work. Okay, well, the other thing is use public pressure. To this point, everybody's been going soft. The only time Joe Manchin flipped out in this entire debate was when Bernie Sanders wrote an op-ed in a West Virginia newspaper calling him out and saying, look, this is the right thing to do, and he should do it. Behind the scenes, Joe Manchin lost it when Bernie did that. What does that show? It's a weak point. You touched a nerve. So he feels like that for a reason. So why not do rallies there? Why not do rallies there in support of Build Back Better? Why not call him corrupt? Why not call him, the plutocrat's Democrat or whatever? Do a public pressure campaign. Threaten to primary him and give all the support of the Democratic Party to a primary challenger. There are things you could do. There are paths you could take, but you have to actually want it and you have to do the work. And I don't think they want it that bad, and I definitely don't think they're going to do the work, and they don't have it in them. All Biden has in him is backslapping and calling him JoJo. And this is what that got us. So, Joe Manchin has officially ended the Biden presidency, and he's pissing on its ashes. And to answer the Charlemagne question, when he asked Kamala Harris, who's the real president, Biden or Manchin? Well, now you know. It's Joe Manchin. If the Democrats are only as good as their most conservative Democrat in the caucus, well then, you need to make them bend the knee by any means necessary. And if you're not going to do that, I don't want to hear about how much you support various provisions that are good for the people. You don't. Because you're not really lifting a finger to get those things through. I get that governing's not easy. Okay, so work harder. But again, you have to care, you have to want it, and they don't really want it that bad. So Joe Manchin spits in everybody's eye, and we'll get away with it. He'll get away with it. And I'm sure Kyrsten Sinema is somewhere really happy right now that now Manchin's taking all the heat. And she just got off, even though she's not really for the bill either. Look, the rotating villain theory is largely true. So in other words, if it wasn't Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, Warner would step up and he'd be the rotating villain. It was Joe Lieberman back in the day. This is the way it works. But what that means is you need strong leadership. And you need people who actually care, and you need arm twisting and public pressure and real threats that you can back up. like prosecuting crimes. That's the only way to make it happen. FDR welcomed the hatred of the donor class, and he did everything he could to get under their skin and deliver on his agenda. Biden's not doing that. He's half asleep. Biden's half asleep, and Kamala's on some stupid talk show talking about her personal story. That's the way it works. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.